Oh, hey, Catherine. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you very much indeed, in a nice sunny afternoon in Lancashire.
Which I will point out for people, that's unusual. That doesn't happen often. Like, I'm now based out in New York, and it is beautifully sunny nearly every day here. And I gotta say, having also been brought up in Lancashire, it does make a huge difference when the sun comes out, especially on a Friday. Um, So yeah, though, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Now, the question that I always ask everybody who comes up to the show is, how do you like your coffee in the morning?
When I get around to making some coffee, which is probably about 10 o'clock, I like to have a break and make some fresh a pot of coffee. So, kind of boil the kettle, add in some ground coffee, maybe different makes, heat some milk. Then, when the coffee's brewed a bit, I'll just add them together. My coffee. I like fresh coffee, and if it's sunny, I might take a few. If it's sunny at that point, depends on the time of the year. I might just take a few minutes, bit of sunshine outside.
Now, that might be a bit of an indicator on what we're going to be talking about today, but you said take a break. Take a break at about 10 o'clock before you have your coffee. Is there any reasons why you do that?
I think it's because I just like to have a little bit of a go to start with. So I kind of just, particularly if you just looked at emails first, and then I like to only try and do that a limited amount of time, and then I stop, and then I get onto something else. So I have a starter activity and a main thing for the day, just depending on what my schedule is for the day. But if I haven't got too many different things I've already booked in, so I build in a kind of a schedule that involves a mixture of activity and breaks, and and hopefully I've already worked out in advance what those activities are going to be.
Well, it sounds like you've got your you've work and lifestyle routine down. Like there is definitely a pattern in your day. So, what is it that you do, and why do you do it?
So my business life, anyway, which merges many respects to my non-business life, is about designing, working with well-being in the workplace, particularly employee well-being. And of recent year or two, I've been designing a model, a way of looking at employee well-being, and this model is based on a something designed by the OECD about 10 years or so ago, which is a kind of fairly multiple way of thinking about well-being. It's about thinking about how you are, and how your world is around you, as well as that includes people and the environment in which you live. So it's a way of thinking about your well-being is how you are, how you relate to others, and how you relate to the world around you. And so I've been building up this model of well-being, and I've recently had that model in a way converted in a way to digital tool, and I'm at the moment trying to develop that further and see if I can tempt businesses to take an interest.
Well, that is exactly what we're going to be talking about. I want to really delve into. Obviously, you've digitized the tool, and so I want to go more into it. Um, but before we can get into the nooks and crux of that, what has been your journey to this point? So what is it that you've been doing that's enabled you to have the skills and even the idea to go, hey, I've now got this flow, I've now got this almost structure and approach that I know is going to really give value to businesses and, in your instance as well, to teams in businesses. So, what was that journey like of how you've been able to get to this point?
Uh, so my background is I'm a clinical psychologist, qualified to provide psychological practice in the UK, And in this way, I'm qualified to diagnose and treat conditions, mental health treatments, all types of mental disorder. And so I've spent quite a lot of years working with people with disabilities in the UK. And when I decided to move on from that kind of work, I did a variety of other activities, including a business for walking meetings and then a sailing business, which is how come one of the reasons I have done some work with
To have,
Charlie, and Charlie's been
yes.
sailing with me. But those approaches are about. So what I'm really interested in is how people, what makes people feel good about how themselves and about how they are from the world around them. And this, and so this model of thinking about well-being is built up from my background as a psychologist, the things I've designed over the years about how people are, what makes people tick, and what actually helps people to operate in the world. So combining all those sorts of things together, I was able to come up with an idea about improving employee well-being by looking at how the well-being is of everyone as a whole, so the whole person and the whole organization, rather than just looking at the problems that people have. So it's important for me to be aware of what problems people have, just as a business is aware of what difficulties it's got. I'm also interested in what makes things better. So what makes things better for an individual? Where are their strengths? The same is whereas a business have its strengths. And so I put together this approach, which is about improving things that are going well in the business and in the person, and actually attending to and making changes in areas where there are difficulties. And so this model of well-being has built up over time, and and more recently, thinking about the digital aspects, my technology development probably has been rather I'm less knowledgeable about all of that. However, I've actually had a long-term interest in digital technology. From when I was at school, at student, I was involved in a little bit of programming to design psychology experiments. I was one of the first organisations to use email as a means of communication internal to the organisation. I've designed sort of information strategies for organisations, the sense of that information flow, which has nowadays become moved into processes and kind of platforms. And so I've had an interest, I think, in digital technologies, but my actual technical knowledge is rather more limited.
Well, one of the reasons, I was really quite excited when you wanted to come onto the podcast because, yes, we met through your sailing business, and obviously, you know my dad very very well. And first, I just want to, before I get into my point, first and foremost, one of the things I very very much enjoyed when going out sailing with you was your like super clear communication. You come at the whole team approach with so much empathy and allow a person to challenge themselves but make mistakes, and all the things I think that makes a really good sort of team building and also just enjoyable experience. So absolutely thoroughly enjoyed going out sailing with you. So that's I want to say that first and foremost. But yeah, that was also very keen for you to come onto the podcast because of your background in psychotherapy, and because what I see a lot in the media and what I see a lot of kind of experts is the word well-being, and everybody coming at it from different approaches, and sometimes it can feel like, well, what does even well-being even mean? And so it's just interesting now to hear you say, well, when you're looking at a business that is having all of these problems, from your experience, you're going, well, we need to get to the root cause of that from the individual, and what does that look like? So, what are some repeated patterns that you've noticed having worked with businesses, and or even include you've had owners and founders also come through your sailing business as well. So what are these repeated patterns from individuals? The root cause is actually causing some generic problems.
From thinking from and starting with an individual point of view, individual angle. My thinking about well-being is that it starts with the idea that everyone's different. Everyone has their own circumstances, their own backgrounds, their own, if you like, their body, their makeup, their histories. And this means that everyone is different. So that sometimes, often then for me, so actually everyone's experience of the world is different. And therefore their well-being is actually very varied. There are a few patterns. So if people are, there's a little bit coming up which shows that if your family background is, if your family background is generally feeling good and your positive outlook, and you kind of do things as a family, that's more likely to be what the children of the family would do, and they as if pass on to their children. And the converse is true, that to some extent, that if people experience lots of negativity in life, that is what tends to be portrayed, and that carries on through. Now, there are aspects where some of that is about various forms of deprivation, but it's not just about that, because even areas of the world where there's relatively impoverished, people can actually still experience good well-being within the circumstances that they live and connect with people. There are a lot of things to do with what's really important is being able to connect with people, having things to do, having a plan, having a purpose in life. And the tool that I've designed is designed to pick out 10 areas of experience, of your life experience, which are questions about these sorts of your experience of the world and your life. And these 10 questions are the kind of questions that could operate across any culture. And so the idea is that there are patterns, in the sense that if you have good connections with your family and with your the social world in which you live, you're more likely to feel more fulfilled. And even more so, if you, and the second set of patterns is often things like physical health and mental health are connected. So people who experience good mental health are more likely to experience good physical health. And the converse is true, that often, but not necessarily the case. You can have what could be called poor physical health, but actually still feel positive psychologically. So there are patterns. However, it's much more varied than you might think. One of the areas that I've been looking at more recently, though, is when I work with a business, they do a baseline assessment. They conduct a baseline assessment, and that actually starts with each person in the workforce completes their own assessment of, or measure of themselves and their well-being, and I pull the data together, and that creates a baseline for the organisation. But each person does have as I say, have their own experience. But what I always find when looking at a whole workforce, usually 20 plus in the workforce, there will always be a few people who have poorer well-being. There will always be a few people who have better well-being, and there will always be kind of like more people in the middle range who have fluctuating. So sometimes it's good and sometimes not so good. And this pattern is what I'm coming across many organisations, many not just about well-being, but about things that happen in life. There is often this pattern of some people are operating at the kind of like have the better experience, and some people have the poorer experience. And the poorer experience is often linked to poorer levels of mental health and physical health. So that's why there are so many attempts by governments, nations, organised businesses to think about improving mental well-being, improving their well-being as a whole through improving physical health and through improving mental health. These are really important factors. They do affect quite a lot of the rest of your kind of day-to-day life. So yes, there are important patterns, and my job is in a way, but not to assume that is what is the case in this particular situation.
So it sounds like really it's a case of gathering the data, understanding what is that saying about the team, and then, like I said, if there's a middle ground of people who kind of fluctuates, that sounds very natural to me. It's also just sort of monitoring it. So when there is, let's say, a downturn, they've got the tools and skills to just bring them back to the mean. Now, say a person is in a leadership role, and they've gone through a natural career path where they've been a specialist and then they've gone into more of a managerial position and they're looking after a team. And it's their responsibility, obviously, to deliver results from that team to the company, if we want to say what the crux is. But they've not necessarily had this background at all in well-being, or don't really have much knowledge themselves because they are still human. How do they go about kind of understanding their team? How do they go about implementing more well-being? And also, where's that line of responsibility for them as well, to how much do they influence their team? And for context on that question, what's the phrase for the horse to water? You can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to sort of highlight that aspect of you sometimes having I don't want to say motivation, but having the motivation to improve your mental health sometimes does have to come within, and a mindset change. There's obviously, I know there's tools to change that mindset, but I wouldn't expect a leader in a managerial position maybe to have those tools. So go back to the question then: what is, how would a leader be able to implement better well-being in their team?
Thank you. Well, as it happens, yesterday I had a really interesting conversation with a leader or manager and a second person, sort of assistant manager in an organisation, and they've just completed a year's work with me, and they have undertaken data about the staff wellbeing, which they've repeated 3 or 4 times over the past year. And so we were doing a sort of final annual review, going back, what has been the pattern, what's been happening over the past year. And one of the things that is really important behind whether an organisation actually pays attention to wellbeing is an awareness that a responsibility for improving your well-being is both yours as an individual, and there is a responsibility for the organisation to actually assist with this, to support in many ways by not making things worse at work for you, by B, making sure that actually what you're good at, you can do more of. So this is what's called a strengths-based approach to thinking about improving well-being, is helping you as an individual work at your best by making sure that what you do, your tasks and activities within the role that you operate, you're able to operate that make it work for you. this leads to a whole variety of things, but the important thing is that it's the individual responsibility to do what they can do, as well as the organisation's responsibility to make sure to help not make things difficult, but actually to find ways of making things better. So that's at an individual level. So the idea responsibility for well-being is shared. That's a key point. Mm-hmm. The second layer, and this is when things are about the relationship between the individual and manager, or the individual and others in their team. It's about communication. It's about conversation. How do people have conversations about how they feel? And again, this in the organisation I'm working with, one of the things that they have done very clearly is that they have been able to build in the idea of having conversations, that it's okay to have a conversation about how you are. And what one of the things that commented that they said was that the room, the staff room, the room where people congregate for breaks, has very much moved from being a somber, quiet environment to one where there's a lot more laughter. And that has helped improve the atmosphere, the sense of working here, the team working, the sense of connecting with people. And the third level, which is that what the organisation needs to do, and this is how it all comes together. There has to be a strategy, and there has to be an overall awareness that actually well-being is important. It's central to us. It's a resource. But there has to be a strategy for moving from kind of where we started off to where we want to be going, and the strategy and well-being is part of, rather, well-being needs to be seen as a strategy for the organisation, not just to make people feel better.
So, what do you can you just elaborate a little bit further? What is it that you mean about that?
So when I work with an organisation, the starting point, the context, is that they're actually wanting to make changes. Mm. So they're making changes as an organisation, that perhaps a merger that they're undertaking, or it might be some organisational change, cultural awareness, all sorts of things that they could be doing as an organisation to get to wherever they want to get as a business. However, what also is the recognition by people who are the leaders is that the resource of well-being is important for our people. How people are, and is part of their engagement with it. It's engagement with this process of change, and they can only engage with this process of change if they feel that they can trust, if they feel that they can, as if got the scope within themselves to do something different, to maybe take on different roles, or to act differently if their roles require them to be doing different things. And so it's this important. So well-being is actually about creating a time and space for making changes, for thinking not just about yourself, but how we are all together. So if we are all working together, we are all feeling better about what we do. We're also more likely to feel better about and building things that are going to be better for ourselves as well, because those are interconnected. Okay. So the whole thing is a kind of at least a 3-level system of things that connect together.
And that makes sense to me. So it's so if I just sort of very nice summarize, the business leader, the business owner, I'm just going to put this instance, is looking to take the business, say, into a new direction for the next 3 to 5 years. They have got to navigate. I'm going to use the sail analogy. Going to navigate the compass to the boat for the whole team to go in a new direction, and with new direction brings change. And as humans, none of us like change because change brings uncertainty. It brings doubt. It brings the unknown, and it is, like in my opinion, the leader to reassure and task the team with all the tools they need to do in order to feel confident, feel reassured, and also be able to do the best work that they can do. and then to do that, you've got to work with the individual of what works for them.
Yes, that's right. You summarised well, and that what you've described mainly there is this notion of mindset, that the shift that individuals can make from we're feeling confused about what we're doing. And often that's what happens in the process of change. It is about confusion, but it's also working through that a bit more, trusting people to work through to the next stage of moving from confusion to clarity, moving from a bit uncertainty about what our role's about to being more certain and having agency over aspects of the work. So some of these, so yes, these sometimes are called the change in mindset of individuals and how that works through to how they work, that works together as in a team.
And that's brilliant. And going so going back to sort of the sailing, because what I like about it is you've got to. It's a very nice, beautiful analogy, because it's a small team all having to work together to do one, like, with very formulaic tasks. There's only a few ways that you can sort of helm the ship, and you can do the navigation. We're all going to work as a team. We're going to be able to communicate. So how does the well-being aspect sort of lead, like, what have you learned from the sailing that's gone into the well-being, and the well-being that's gone into the sailing?
Some of the things I've learned from from sailing, is that one thing is that there is kind of fitness is part of it. However, you can at the same time adapt to when people have have limitations in the usual aspects of fitness or mobility that require either modifying or overcoming in some ways. And the challenge is that actually there's usually some other things that person can do well. So even if someone has limited or different abilities, for example, in sailing, they may well be very good at something else. And that is what the task of the skipper is, to bring out what people are good at. What can you do that actually is part of a job that is maybe your specialist role? However, you can have a specialist role, but it's also important in a boat is to be able to shift things. Not everyone can do their own thing all the time, and you have to be able to have enough knowledge and a bit of flexibility to assist someone else, or to move a role. Say you need to double up on a particular activity, so someone else who wouldn't normally be doing that task might need to come along to double up to doing a task. Or an unusual one might be someone might have to go to the top of the mast. Yep. Now, there's usually someone who's smaller in the team, and usually people who are more kind of physically fit, who can do all the winching to get you up the mast. And as it happens, because I'm the female skipper, and usually I'm smaller than most of the other people, I usually go up the mast, but I like them at going up the mast because actually I like heights. So going up heights is not a problem for me, where it would be to a lot of people. So yes, there are things that you're good at, and sailing has so many good kind of metaphors for business activities, and gives you a lot of a kind of scope for imagination in the process. But yes, so the idea is that you've got your skills, or your skills to do the things that you like to do, but actually you have to be sufficiently flexible to be able to come in to do other things. And there are, operate at different paces. Some people can dart about a bit more, but some people are more have to more stay still for all sorts of reasons. They don't. Maybe they're just less stable on the boat, for example. So there's all sorts of things to think about, how you combine all those different capabilities to get to where you want to go. But one of the really interesting things about this is sometimes thinking, well, how do we know? Asking the question, well, how do we know things are going well? And just thinking about a sailing boat, for example. Well, there's a direction you want to go in, there's a speed you want to go at, Then there's what's the wind doing and what's the tide doing, what's the currents doing underneath you. And putting all those things together are quite a complicated bit of navigation. It's not a straight line. So sometimes to get from A to B or A to your wherever you want to get to, you don't go in a straight line because you can't get there in a straight line. You have to zigzag or go round something. And so this is often a useful metaphor for business, because your final point might be that where you're trying to get to, or rather where you can see on the horizon to where you want to get to, it's actually not a straight line. You might need to go somewhere to pick up a better current to get to where you want to go. So it's so you don't necessarily go in a straight line. So another good example is the notion of fast speed through the water. So we have lots of dials. So that's like the dashboard of a business. So how fast you're going, what direction you're going in, and so on. Now, boat speed, people like to have the sense of good boat speed. You feel like you're getting there, you're moving on, you're moving with the boat, you're moving with everything, and the movement's good. And then you look and check on the map, on the chart, and you find that you're heading off for a cliff. And that's because if you focus just on the speed that you're going at because it feels good, it might be a vanity metric. And instead, you have to keep checking, where is it I'm going to? What is my actual destination? It might not be what I just can see, but actually it's something that is just over the horizon. And I want to get to that point. But just going fast isn't just necessarily the way to get there.
I think that is everything very, very beautifully put. And I'm laughing a little bit when you were saying different sailors all have a very different, let's call it different vibe on how they approach sailing. And we all, in our family, my dad, my mum, and me, all three of us have very different styles of sailing. My mum is very much the Mediterranean sailor in the sun. I sit a little bit more at that camp. I need a nice force 5, a beautiful tack with a glass of wine in my hand. And then you've got my dad, who's very much going to be racing the boats and how much can we get those stanchions into the water. It's a very different, arguably we're all going to the same destination because we're trying to get from point A to point B, but we have very different approaches on how we all want to get there. And what I thought was really beautifully put is it's kind of going full circle back to what is the individual's strengths? How can we, really lean into those strengths, but just have enough flexibility and adaptability to then be able to be a part of a team, and how that looks like. And it's just so funny. I just had this conversation just yesterday as well. We were talking between us about servant leadership, and I never knew it's such a rogue story, but HBO employed a number of people from Microsoft into their company. So for them, let's use them as a sort of a case study. HBO, in the streaming services, subscription services, are looking to obviously take more of the market share in the US. And they've got a new vision that they're trying to obviously take on Hulu and Netflix and be that big name. That's their vision, that's their goal. So what they did is then they employed a few people from Microsoft to bring in more of that tech arm to it. Now, the reason why I mention this is Hulu, pre this merger and acquisition and that new direction, they were known for being a very collaborative culture. They were known for being very family, business orientated, shared ideas, have really great teams to help each other and develop each other and grow. That was their culture as a business. Now, Microsoft at the time, I don't know if this has changed, but at the time, they had a more competitive business culture. So each of the teams worked in silos between themselves and would compete for points on a leaderboard and would rank themselves from the best team to the worst team. And if you're consistently the worst team, you're always put up for a review, or you're put up to HR. You could be out the door essentially. So what would happen seems so obvious to me, but what happened would cause a hostile culture of nobody collaborating, everybody's trying to beat each other, and also because it's a hostile environment, stab each other in the back. So imagine bringing this whole massive team and arm to a business where you've got opposing cultures against each other, and it basically caused hundreds of people to leave HBO and get out because they were like, for an example, someone would say, "Oh, we've got this idea as a team over here from the collaborative culture," and the other team would go, "Yeah, that's a great idea," but then they would go to leadership and go, "No, this is a terrible idea," and shoot that other team's idea down. How is that a growth mindset? And as a result, the well-being of the employees would go, well, this is rubbish. I don't have any purpose. I don't enjoy my job anymore. I don't really have any creativity ideas. And I bet the cooler station in the office, I don't think there'll be much laughter in that workplace at that time. And that's kind of the example of, the anti-indicator, or the indicators. This is what I want to get right full on to, is the indicators of how do you know that well-being is not good there? How do you know his culture is not there? Or how do you know that the ship is not being guided to the way that you want to be? So I kind of want to finish on that last note. What are some negative indicators to know that your ship you're looking at vanity metrics and your ship is going in the wrong direction?
When you can see, I guess, the hazard ahead, I think, but B, when you've completely lost sight of your wider goals, your further goals. Your sight is only to your nearest target, if you like, rather than keeping in mind, but not in sight necessarily, because you maybe can't see it. It's further ahead. It's over the horizon. The end, or the end, or towards the end objectives, or towards the further objective. So it's the difference between goals or targets versus longer term objectives, and making sure that those not just are compatible, but they are kind of extensions of. And the second one is when there's just a kind of apparent kind of like productivity for its own sake, rather than innovation. So the productivity, things are being made, widgets are being made. Yeah. But actually there's no time for reflection, even thinking, how well are we making our widgets? How well kind of do we connect with customers? Because that is about keeping in mind, like, the longer term objective of kind of sustainability for the business. So if just short term thinking tends not to be sustaining.
And it's very true. And one of the questions I always ask everybody is, what is your vision? What is your vision for the business? What are you going to do in 5 years? What are you going to do in 10 years? Nobody really likes to think what you're going to do in 10 years, because it's like, well, if I think about what I'm going to do in 10 years, it's going to box me into what I'm going to do. And actually, well, if you don't got that longer term vision, how are you going to be able to work back? Well, what do I need to do next year? What do I need to do next month? What do I need to do next week? And that 10-year vision can change, because sometimes you go, well, I'm going to go for this thing. And the universe goes, no, we're not going to give you this thing, but we're going to give you something better, because here's all the little increments that you've kind of been working towards and you've been kept focused on. So I think that's a beautiful place to end it. But I want to obviously just you to have some time just to say a little bit more about Decayma and where people can find it. So how can people get to you? How can people find you?
So yes, Decayma. Thank you. Decayma is a name, is a word I've made up. Although it turns out that when I checked out domain names, that there actually is a word called Decayma, Decama. What I came up with, the idea of 10 questions. So 10 Dec is 10, and AMA could be said, ask me another. So basically 10 questions. And the where you can find it, have a website called decayma-uk.com. And so that will give some information about the Decayma, what Decayma is, the process of Decayma Flow, which is the organisational process, and access, well, or rather, contacted me for access to a test version of the app, the Decayma Wellbeing app, and any other information. I can be contacted through Catherine at decayma-uk.com or Catherine at cdpsychology.co.uk.
And finally, what is something that somebody could buy from you that is under £100 that would add a ton of value to their lives?
That something that, well, what I have is a model of called Decayma Flow. The main process of that is a platform for which they've got a kind of quite large, would be a reasonable involvement over time. However, one aspect of this is the third level, the third tier of Decayma Flow is the organisation audit. And this is how an organisation looks at well-being across a variety of different organisational processes. And what I've got is the model, of this audit picture, which I can offer for £100.
Perfect. So I'll make sure to put it onto the link so that people can reach it. And obviously, I think I'll put your email as well so you can reach out and get started on that. I know I'm signed up as one of the sort of the beta testers as well. So I'll be in there as well with other people. Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you so much for your time today and coming on Charlie with Friends.
Thank you very much, Charlie. It's been very interesting. It's nice going sailing.
Have a great day. See you soon.